That's beautiful. Thank you. We have such a beautiful altar. I hope you've been able to, as I've been sitting, I just have, that's just in front of me or to my right, and it's just so perfect for these days in this time. And like, everybody, have you noticed that everybody who gives a Zoom talk first has to say how nice it is to see everyone in these faces? And, you can't help but want to say that because it's, and to want to scroll through and see all of the faces. It's beautiful. And here we are on the last day of our 90-day Winter Ango. You may recall we started that in December. And here we are. And it will end it's been a Zoom assisted urban Ango. And many years ago, we decided at the Village Zendo to have one of the 90-day retreats take place in the city. And with attention to all of the things that happen here, the sufferings and the joy, the beauty and the horror. And so through the years, we have explored different ways of having what we call an urban 90-day retreat right within the city. And tomorrow, we will be welcoming our Shuso, Michael Hongo Brooks, as he gives his first Dharma talk. And we'll engage him with questions about his understanding of the koan and the talk that he gives. And we call that, it's actually a traditional Chinese, then Japanese, now American, Shuso Hosen, a way of welcoming a person who's studied intimately with teachers for many years and has learned to express their intimate understanding of Zen. Just from a deeply personal understanding, modulated by years of practice. So naturally, it's a time of celebration for the Zen community. But today is a time of celebration. And yet, the times have brought our attention to so much suffering in the world, called our attention to the way we humans continue to create suffering through our greed, through our anger, and through our ignorance. Those very human qualities are the classic Buddhist three poisons, the definition of the cause of suffering. Greed, wanting what you do not have. Anger towards others for what they have or what they do. And ignorance, and this is the one that's most profound for me these days, ignorance of our fundamental interconnection with all beings. We fail to realize our interconnection. Indeed, they are the three poisons: greed, anger, and ignorance. So these days, we're reading, listening, witnessing the three poisons unraveling in Ukraine, in Russia. Oh yeah, in Afghanistan, right? We forgot, but that was last month. Palestine, India, China, New York City. So many places in the world. Right where we live. We witness the daily news of COVID, the frustration and anger of people who are seemingly unable to contain what's happening in their lives, and thus creating more anger and violence, aberrant outbursts in the marketplace, on the streets. My son got a new job this year. He was working in sets, and now he's buying things for the sets. So he's driving in the city a lot to go to different places to buy these products and things. And he talks about the traffic. He said it is unbelievable how different it is than it was like 4 or 5 years ago, that people are so angry all the time, cutting one another off in traffic and screaming and yelling. I mean, there's kind of this loss of any patience that maybe there once was in the public domain. We could say that here we are in mass society at a time when it's hard to engage the healing and protective mechanisms for just ordinary people. I see it in myself too. Sometimes when I'm on the street, it's like, what was that anger towards this bicycle that almost ran me over? You know, well, fortunately, I'm so old, I don't act it out, but what's going on internally, you know, is kind of serious. And then we can wonder what happened to the grave concern we all had about climate change. Huh? It got dropped from the conversation. And it hasn't gone away. So at times like this, you know, we have to ask ourselves, what are we to do? What to do? Try to keep the issues and peoples all in our hearts. Try to offer what we can. I mean, I feel so inadequate donating my little bits to various needy organizations. We have to do that though. Offer what we can and continue with, you know, any project that we have ongoing. We still have a connection to our Sing Sing prison sangha. We're not able to go there, but those people who are involved with that are still connecting as they can to the Sing Sing sangha. The letters to the solitary, that commitment is going on. I see the letters passing through the Zendo all the time, so we pass them on to the others. The Afghan immigrant project that Doshin is organizing, hopefully that will come to fruition this year. And the myriad projects that we're called to bear witness to. From our aging neighbor who's just lost her dog after 8 years. Or the little girl next door who's teething. That's a suffering from a long time ago. And the ongoing COVID crisis all over the world, in places we don't hear about or read about. The sadness or the political paranoia and hatred that's triggered Russia and that exists here in this country and in so many countries around the world. So much suffering. And it's spring, and the daffodils are coming up. The whole city is bright yellow. So what I want to share with you today is 2 weeks ago in the New York Times, there was a brilliant study by this woman by the name of Eliza Gabbert about a poem of W.H. Auden's. And it was written in 1938 on the eve of the Great War. The poem is called Musee de Beaux Arts, referring to the museum in Belgium. And the poem is about suffering and of our difficulty to relate to it. About suffering and the human difficulty of relating to it. Now, on the subjective level, it's about a painting from the museum, a painting that you may be familiar with. It's a painting by Bruegel, a landscape showing a farmer tilling a field and a shepherd with sheep, a fisherman by the sea, and many ships in the distance. And way off to the side, towards the bottom, we see just a leg as it slips into the sea, following a body already below the waves. Fusho, can you show that painting to us? Ah, you may recognize this. Okay, just a second, I have to get this here.
Can you, is it spotlit?
Yes, we see it very well. Thank you. So this is the painting by Bruegel. And there you see the farmer and the shepherd. Down the lower right, you see the fisherman. Oh, there's Icarus falling into the water. There's a ship going out. There's some other ships there. In the background there, you know, there's a city. It's a very, very well-known painting. So Icarus was the son of Daedalus, the great artisan, very well known in ancient times. And Icarus was incarcerated, so he needed to escape from Crete. So he used wings that were made by his father Daedalus, and they were made by wax and feathers. Icarus loved flying. It was so exciting that he just wanted to go higher and higher. And he flew too near the sun and melted the wax. And so he was killed as he was plunged into the sea. Some of us might think maybe Putin is flying a little too near the sun right now. So here's the poem that W.H. Auden wrote about this painting. About suffering, they were never wrong, the old masters. How well they understood its human position. How it takes place while someone else is eating or opening a window or just walking dully along. How when the aged are reverently, passionately waiting for the miraculous birth, there always must be children who did not specially want it to happen, skating on a pond at the edge of the wood. They never forgot that even the dreadful martyrdom must run its course. Anyhow, in a corner, in some untidy spot, where the dogs go with their doggy life, and the torturer's horse scratches its innocent behind on a tree. In Bruegel's Icarus, for instance, how everything turns away quite leisurely from the disaster. The plowman may have heard the splash, the forgotten cry, but for him it was not an important failure. The sun shone as it had to on the white legs disappearing into the green water, and the expensive, delicate ship that must have seen something amazing, a boy falling out of the sky, had somewhere to get to and sailed calmly on. Do you get the sense of this poem by W.H. Auden? The old masters, how well they understood its human position about suffering, how it takes place while someone else is eating, opening a window, or just walking dully along. How, when the aged are reverently, passionately waiting for the miraculous birth, there always must be children who do not especially want it to happen, skating on a pond at the edge of the wood. They never forgot that even the dreadful martyrdom must run its course, anyhow, in a corner, in an untidy spot, where the dogs go on with their doggy life and the torturous horse scratches its innocent behind on a tree. In Bruegel's Icarus, for instance, how everything turns away quite leisurely from the disaster. The plowman may have heard the splash, the forgotten cry, but for him it was not an important failure. The sun shone as it had to on the white legs disappearing into the green water, and the expensive, delicate ship that must have seen something amazing, a boy falling out of the sky, had something to get to and sailed calmly on. Thanks, Fu Shou, if you thank you. That's great. So I think these, particularly these first four lines, speak to our condition these days. About suffering, they were never wrong. The old masters, how well they understood its human position, how it takes place while someone else is eating or opening a window or just walking dully along. We might consider our response to seeing the news of Ukraine refugees, the war, the reaction to the Black and brown refugees held at the Polish border, to the homeless men killed in our streets, to personal outbursts of anger and violence all around us, and our own personal response to the irrational reactivity to the COVID demands. All of our responsiveness to this, or lack of it, is a function of a reality that Auden is pointing to. Its human position. How suffering takes place while someone else is eating or opening a window or just walking dully along. Auden seems to argue that the old masters, like Bruegel, thought it natural, ordinary, to not see, to not bear witness to the suffering around us. He suggests that it's just what humans do. They go along and take care of their sheep or their computer. We keep plowing or texting and hardly notice the suffering around us. It seems to be the way of most of our lives. And yet, if we stop for a moment, stop and breathe, to remember that we are actually only a part of the whole, that each of us shares a part of the sky, of the earth, a part of being itself, then we are able to partake of the suffering and the joy of the world. You know, Auden isn't scolding us. And he's not scolding the old masters. He's not scolding the human condition. He's simply pointing to it, sadly. And through his poem, I think he's offering a healing. showing us how it is when we don't look, when we don't care, when we don't pay attention. He writes, in Bruegel's Icarus, for instance, how everything turns away quite leisurely from the disaster. The plowman may have heard the splash, the forsaken cry, but for him it was not an important failure. You know, this poem says so much by not saying directly what our relationship is, what our responsibility is to the suffering around us. Auden lets us take lessons from the master and decide for ourselves what it is to bear witness to the suffering. How can we do that? What helps us to see and explore what can be hidden by our habitual life? You know what I think it is? I think it's poetry, painting, drawing, music that helps us to find a way to bear witness. Sometimes it's so subtle, we can miss it. It can be a line on a white page or a whole page of words or a splash of color. That moment when sound reaches our ears. The insight, the connection to humanity arises at that time. We can turn towards suffering when we have the expressive tools to do so. Some way to articulate our distress, to articulate the hardship that we witness, that we bear witness to. The hardship that accompanies all of life. And these same tools offer us at the same time joy, realization of our connectedness, and compassion. You know, Fusho's talk on Thursday pointed to the power of creativity to refresh us and encourage us. And in this very week, when the world was so cruel, we were able to take some nourishment and teachings through the arts that we studied in our retreat. Being in a line with Hongo as we drew, or that amazing flow of color in painting with Emma, Seiki, and the wisdom and compassion of words that we found working with Joshin Roshi. And it was our Shuso, Hongo, who led us through this healing and bearing witness through the arts. You know, Hongo is a longtime student of the arts. He studied at the Art Students League and at Bridgeview Academy. And he claims that sculpture is his true passion. Something you may have practiced with him for 6 or 7 years and not know. So tomorrow, Hongo is going to offer some thoughts on his study. You know, he has studied koans for 6 years with teachers in a very rigorous, methodical way, hardly missing a week. He'll offer his first talk. And he'll defend his understanding of the koan that he's chosen. I hope you support him. And the way you would do that is if you sign up to ask him a question. That shows your support. And you can engage him in a Dharma dialogue. You know, there's always a lot of laughter and joy during Shusohosen. It is a time of celebration for our community. And those of you who are new to our community, you're so welcome to join in the celebration and see what it's like. There's a lot of laughter and a lot of wisdom. It just arises. I'm grateful, Hongo, to you for your continued presence during this time. We've come to work well with Zoom. We'll continue. This isn't going to be over when some of us can go into a space. We've already installed a huge monitor right next to the altar for our continued Zoom presence. But the Arts Ango study was terrific. I appreciated it so much. And to remember that we can turn to our own expression and that of others to enhance our understanding and our wisdom, and to keep us from falling into apathy or overreaction, but to be present in the middle of it. In the middle of it, the suffering that is life itself. Here's my Gatha. Yes, so much suffering around me. Do I even see it? Also the spring flowers, tears and sorrow, and yet laughter, life breaking and blossoming. What are we to make of it? Offering our witness, simply our witness.